Hey guys, Mr. Mini Painter here and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to show you how I painted Harvey Bullock from the Batman Gotham City Chronicles game by Monolith board games. Now I tweaked him just a little bit because in the original art he has a cigar hanging from his mouth and the Mini did not. So I'm going to show you a very quick and easy way to add one of your own if you're interested, and if you're not, just skip that part and get to where we're going to be painting Harvey himself. So I hope this video is of any help to you guys, and if it is, please leave a comment below. I'd love to hear from you, and consider subscribing to the channel as I'll be making a lot more videos. Now let's get to painting. So here's my miniature all primed in a light gray primer, and what I noticed is that when you check the card, there is a tiny cigar in his mouth which isn't on the model, and it's such a fun detail that I decided to make one. So I took my tiny drill, figured where the hole should be, and put a little tiny hole in there with the smallest drill you have, and I'm going to use a toothpick to put in there. So pull out the remaining plastic, just a tiny hole is more than enough, and I'm using the end of a toothpick because it's nice and thin at the end and a bit thicker along the way. So I'm using my knife and very carefully make some incision in there until it very gently breaks. We've got this tiny piece of wood here which I'm going to glue in his mouth. So now he resembles the card. It's just a fun little detail, but now he has a cigar in his mouth, which I also primed in a light gray primer, and now I'm starting to paint Harvey Bullock. For skin I'm using Nightquestor Flesh, as his skin is quite dark. It's always easy to start with a dark undercoat as well. Well, he's not dark skinned, but he's not pale, that's what I mean actually. So it's his hands and his face. Next I'm highlighting that with some Kislev Flesh, which might seem quite bright, but I'm kind of blending it together. So first outline the hard pieces of light, so the eyebrows, tip of the nose, the cheekbones, the brightest parts, so to say. And afterwards thin down your Kislev Flesh and kind of blend those colors together. You might have to do that in 2 or 3 steps. So take your time and you get a very nice result with some flow in the brightness of the skin tones. Next I'm washing the skin and blend all those colors together with some Wayland Flesh shade. Thin it down to about a 50-50 consistency with some water or any thinner you have. Once that's done, I decided to paint the eye sockets all black, just to give them a dark, grim look. Now if you're able, you can do this of course before painting the skin and leave those eye sockets black or paint it black depending on your primer. Next I'm painting in the eyes and leaving some of that black around the eye. This really makes the eye pop out a bit more than just painted over the skin. Back to Abaddon Black to paint in a tiny pupil. Now with black I'm painting his hair. There is a tiny lock on his forehead with some strands of hair, and there is a tiny part showing just below his head on the back of his head as well. Now with this done, I decided to pale up his skin just a little bit on the parts that would be visible by light under his hat. So it's just the cheekbones, part of his cheek, and a little bit of his chin and upper lip. Don't overdo it, just a very subtle highlight, and maybe some of the knuckles on his fingers here. And that's it. I also painted some eyebrows with the black in the previous step. Then with some dried bark I painted the cigar in his mouth. Of course this is optional depending on if you have placed the cigar or not. I painted the tip of the cigar with some grey cere to make it bright, and then go over it with some Iandan yellow, a contrast paint with some nice yellows and orange in it, as if the cigar is really glowing. And there we have our painted cigar. It's not the sharpest image, but you get the idea. Then with some Apothecary White I painted his shirt. Apothecary White is a nice contrast paint to use on bright colors instead of Nuln Oil, which leaves very black lines even if you thin it down. And this is a subtle shade on white. For the red I'm mixing Wordbearer's Red with some Rhinox Hide on the tie. I didn't want him to have any very bright colors. He is like a detective, policeman, and I wanted him to be kind of dull in colors. For his pants I mixed some dried bark with Abaddon Black to create a very plain piece of pants. Then his coat is a base layer of Thondia Brown, which we are going to be highlighting next. Now I'm painting all the base colors first and doing some highlighting later on all of it. Next is the hat with pure dried bark. Now it's time for our first highlight of the shirt. And I'm using grey cere again to pick out the brightest parts, the top part of the wrinkles. And with that shade done before, you can really now see that white coming out of it. I don't want to use pure white on the shirt because the shirt is never that white. Next I mixed some XV88 into the Thondia Brown and covered about 70% of the coat, leaving the darker parts nice and dark, and focus on the top part of the wrinkles, the top part of the cloak. I'm repeating this process by increasing the amount of XV88, turning a bit more towards the yellow. Now with every step you take, it's important to leave some of the previous color showing through, and then you get a nice transition in color, so from dark to brighter to brighter to brightest. Now we're not done yet with the coat, but I'm letting it dry, and in the meanwhile I'm adding a layer of Agrax Earthshade to the hat, giving it some definition and some darkness. Focus mainly on the inside of the hat, so to say, because the edges are going to be brighter. Now it's time to get back to the coat with pure XV88. Now I'm focusing just on the very ends, the very tips, the very edges of this coat to give it a really specific highlights. So just the front, the very edges here. I'm gonna play with light a little bit. Imagine where your light source is coming from, and that part can be the brightest. If it's the top, just focus on those top edges. I'm taking it to a final extreme with some Baylor brown, which is just a tiny bit more yellow. So I'm just touching the tips here and there to make that coat a nice piece on this mini. As it's the largest part of the miniature, you should put some attention to it. Now it's time to get back to the pants with some pure dried bark. Pick out those highlights there as well. I'm using that same dried bark on the hat and pick out those raised areas and the edges of the hat, just to cover up the aggressor shade we did before, but leaving it in those deeper areas. Next, I'm highlighting the pants with Gotham brown, just on some tiny spots. I want the pants to remain quite dark, so just focus on those edges and those folds just above the shoes, for example. And do the same on the hat. Focus on the folds, the front, and the edge of the hat. Makes it a bit more of a worn hat. Next, I'm using pure rhinox hide on his belt. It's just a tiny part showing, but it's always nice to have a different kind of brown to make it stand out with the browns of the pants. Next, I'm going to paint the rim of the hat with the same colors as the tie, so word bearer's red mixed with some rhinox hide. And next I'm going to be highlighting both the tie and the band around the hat with pure word bearer's red. Leave the deeper part, the shady parts of the tie darker, and focus on the top parts, the parts above the folds. And do the same on the hat. Just focus on the front here. Then the gun I'm painting with Iron Warriors. You can use lead belcher or any kind of metal you have, but what I like about this Iron Warriors is that it's a bit darker than, for example, lead belcher. Next I'm using pure rhinox hide on his shoes as well. I'm washing that with some Agric Earthshade once it's dry. And I'm washing the weapon with some Nuln Oil, just to add some tiny dark edges here and there. Finally, the base with some Mechanicus Standard Grey. Once it's dry, wash that with a large puddle of Nuln Oil. I'm going quite heavy here, just to bring out those dark, very subtle edges in the base. It's not much, but you have to pick it out in some way. I'm dabbing some Agrax Earthshade into this still wet mixture. I'm doing the same with some Athonian Chemo Shade, just to add some different colors to the base, because it's nice to dirty it up just a little bit. You can add some Quelia Green Shade if you want as well, and just blend that together a little bit. Now you let that dry, and once it's dry, you just dry brush some Gray Seer over that to create some sharpness, and you get this nice dirty street look. And that's it for Harvey Bullock, another character of the Batman Gotham City Chronicles game finished. Now if you like this kind of content, please consider subscribing to my channel, leave a comment, I'd love to hear from you, and also follow me on my Patreon page, as I'll be painting a lot more of this game and many other games that are exclusively to Patreon. For now, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in one of my next videos. Bye bye!